To my fellow natives, I have a question. In today's political climate, do you feel the same way that I do? Like, genuinely, do you hear me on this? Do you have this weird feeling of where you just want to go home? You just, like, your spirit is telling you go home, wherever home is, but you know what I'm talking about. You know what I mean when I say home. When do we get to go home?
No, my daughter! Native American was just arrested and ICE tried to deport her.
Today we will hear from Black Americans speaking on being the Aboriginal Indigenous American copper-colored people of America. Check it out.
They took so much time and effort to bury the truth about who we are. They just wanted us to be slaves from Africa, to have no identity, to have no roots. And they went to great lengths to cover up our identities. So they are controlling the vital statistics and what it looks like and who is on the census and how you are represented on the census. Oh, you're light-skinned or you're this, that, or the other. That was introduced to us by colonizers. So let's stop pushing forward that narrative and remember who we are. We are the people of this land. We honor the land. We honor our ancestors. We honor the truth. So let's, share our truths. If your truth is different than mine, it doesn't mean you're wrong and I'm right, or I'm right and you're wrong. It just means this is what I found.
What I know and what I've heard and just what I've seen is that the GOV is trying to say that birthright citizenships of Native Americans isn't a real thing. That we were not here, and so it's not our right just to be a citizen of America because, pause, now I'm hearing because we actually came from Siberia and we weren't always here. So that's what I'm getting at, is that there's a lot of different places I've heard right now up north, people's reservations are getting split in half and some are being sent to Canada. How is that possible? I don't really know. The Siberia thing, I don't know. I'm just reading comments and this is what everyone's saying is we weren't from here. We're not the first ones here. Okay, I wasn't here years and years and years ago, so I can't really tell you, but from, I don't know, just history in itself, I don't know where the hell we're all going to go. So be it. I mean, turn up in Siberia, I guess. All my natives are just going to meet me there. We're going to have a big old party in 49, That's probably what we're going to do.
Black American ancestors, the copper-colored indigenous Americans, did not come from Africa at all. They were the master architects who built the pyramids on both continents long before there were any African dynasties. Africa learned civilization from Black Americans, not the reverse. Black Americans are the descendants of the original master builders, the ancestors who created the most advanced ancient civilizations. Then they spread that knowledge globally. We are the original Moors of Tamari or Turtle Island. We are the ancient Egyptians. We are the mound builders of Mississippi. We are the Olmecs, the Mayans, and the Aztecs. This gets so deep, we're just getting started.
You see why these motherfuckers hate us so much, bro? Yo, you cannot make this shit up. So I'm up here doing Lyft, right? And I pick up this elderly Black woman and her son, right? So at first they brought up the conversation about the weather in Austin, talking about Austin and stuff like that. And the most I put it on my spirit, I'm like, ma'am, can I ask you a question? I'm like, cause she was older. I was like, have you ever heard anything from your grandparents about being from Africa, any customs, traditions, or anything like that from your parents and your grandparents, right? Because this woman, she probably was like in her 70s, probably like early 70s, right? She was like, no. No. I was like, you ever heard anything about them being Native American or Indian? She was like, yeah. She was like, her grandparents said full-blooded Cherokee. The woman said full-blooded Cherokee Indian, bro. Cherokee, and I think she said an Apache from a 70-year-old woman, right? A woman in her 70s. And then she was going into history about, bro, the Most High was just using her to speak, bro. She was like, she was going into history of like, yeah. And it's in alignment with another video that I seen a sister, an older woman on here posted. She was like, yeah, we was already here and they fucking came over here, bro. And she was going into the story about like how, you know, some of us ran this way, that way, but we was already here, bro. I'm like, yo, you can't make this shit up, bro. Because what you already know, because we already know this, what the Father do? He sent people to just confirm it. I didn't coerce her. I didn't say I literally said, did you ever hear anything about being Native American or Indian? And the spirit just started flowing through her, bro. You can't make this shit up. Black Americans are the real fucking American Indians. The real American Indians, bro. Like, time's fucking up. These lands, the number one lands on earth, are our fucking lands. And these motherfuckers gotta get the fuck off of our lands. It's as simple as that, bro. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah, time's up. You're dealing with the awakened. Okay?
Why do Native Americans feel like they're native to this land? You're not native to this land. If you was native to this land, then Ancestry.gov wouldn't show that your ancestors are from Siberia. Matter of fact, you can Google the fucking shit. Y'all originate from Siberia. Y'all don't come here, okay? And then Africans keep wanting us to believe that we're African and that we're native to Africa because they want our reparations. And they know that all the treaties of the land is the reason why y'all are able to come here. Is the reason why everybody is able to come to America. Because there's treaties that was set with different countries. Why do y'all think Native Americans have what they have? Why do you think Somalians have what they have? Why do you think Hispanics have what they have? There's different treaties with the lands of different countries. And when they come here, they are allowed to have certain businesses set up and different loans set up for them. Anyways, I added proof. I also want y'all to go look up scientific evidence that the first people to ever live was Black people. You will ask, oh, why does it matter? Because everything was stripped from us. Pre-colonization will also show you when they changed around the map because civilization started in America, not in Africa. And remember, pre-colonization was when Black colonies existed and we owned everything. And yet they took all of our information from us.
Based upon all this info you have given me, why is it important for so-called African Americans to know this information and what can be done with it? Why is this information so important for the so-called African Americans? The truth about the Shi Amaru, Olmec, Southeastern Indigenous tribes, and the erasure of dark-skinned Indigenous Americans is critical for the so-called African American because it directly challenges the false narrative of their origins and identity. It's not just history. It's the key to understanding who we really are, what was stolen from us, and how we can reclaim our power. It proves that African Americans are not just descendants of enslaved Africans. The mainstream narrative tells African Americans that they all come from Africa through the transatlantic slave trade. However, early European accounts, U.S. government records, and indigenous oral histories confirm that many dark-skinned Native Americans were reclassified as Black to erase their indigenous land rights and sovereignty. That means that a significant portion of today's African American population is actually of indigenous American descent. It exposes the systematic erasure of our indigenous identity. Laws were created to strip indigenous identity from dark-skinned tribes and force them into Black category. The Dawes Rolls, U.S. Census, and one-drop rule was used to separate us from our indigenous nations. If we don't know who we are, we can't reclaim our stolen lands, culture, or political power. It reconnects us to our spiritual and cultural roots. The southeastern tribes, Yamasee, Washita, Creek, Seminole, Choctaw, etc., share beliefs, practices, and languages with the Olmec Shi Amaru. The Black Church, Hoodoo, and African American spiritual traditions contain hidden indigenous elements. Reclaiming these practices help us reconnect with the land and restore our ancestral wisdom. It challenges the Bering Strait theory and the primitive Indian myth. History books teach that all Native Americans came from Asia through the Bering Strait around 13,000 years ago and that they were primitive hunter-gatherers. But the Olmec, Washita, and Mississippian mound builders proved that indigenous civilization in the Americas were advanced and connected globally. If we reclaim our indigenous past, we destroy the colonial lie that we were savages who needed European civilization. What can be done with this knowledge? Reclaim your indigenous identity and tribal connections. Start researching your family history, surnames, and census records to see if your ancestors were reclassified from Indian to Negro or mulatto. Look into freeman rolls, Dawes rolls, and tribal connections in the Southeast. If you find indigenous roots, connect with existing tribal groups or work to restore recognition for erased nations. Use this knowledge to fight for land and reparations. If your ancestors were indigenous, your family's land was likely stolen through forced reclassification. Some tribes, such as the Washita Nation, are fighting for land rights that were stolen from dark-skinned indigenous peoples. Understanding this history strengthens the case for reparations, not just for slavery, but for the erasure of indigenous identity. Revive indigenous cultural and spiritual practices. Learn about mound building, agricultural techniques, herbal medicine, and ceremonies that our ancestors practiced before colonization. Many African American traditions contain hidden indigenous roots, such as drumming, root work, and storytelling. By reclaiming these traditions, we restore our ancestral power. Challenge the narrative in schools and media. Push for historical curriculum changes that include the truth about dark-skinned indigenous Americans. Educate your community through TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and local events, and expose the erasure of indigenous history in mainstream textbooks. Build economic and political power through indigenous identity. Native American tribes receive federal recognition, land allotments, and economic benefit. If more African Americans prove their indigenous roots, it could shift the political and economic power. Sovereign indigenous nations have legal rights that Black Americans as a racial category do not. Conclusion, this is a call to action. This history isn't just about the past, it's about reclaiming what was stolen. So many so-called African Americans are actually indigenous Americans whose identity was erased. Reclaiming this truth allows us to reconnect with our ancestral lands, traditions, and legal rights. This is about power, land, and sovereignty.
When most people hear Native American, they imagine red skin and feathers. When they hear Black American, they think Africa and slavery. The reality is that Native Black American Indians have always been part of this land. Early European maps and journals described Black Indians up and down the Atlantic coast, tribes with dark skin, curly or woolly hair, living in organized nations before Europeans ever set foot here. In fact, many southeastern tribes, the Yamasee, Washita, Catawba, and even branches of the Cherokee, were described as Black. Some even fought against colonists in the 1500s and 1600s, long before slavery became the main narrative. One erased truth is land ownership. Native Black American Indians held territory across the South, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi. The Washita Nation, recognized in old French and Spanish treaties, were Black indigenous people who lived along the Mississippi River Valley. They farmed, fished, built towns, and traded with Africa and the Caribbean before colonization. That history has been buried because it doesn't fit the slaves-only storyline. Another truth, the Seminole Nation. The Seminole people in Florida were never a single tribe. They were a union of native groups and free Black people who escaped slavery. Together, they built one of the strongest resistance movements against the U.S. government. The Seminole Wars in the 1800s were so fierce that America spent more money fighting them than almost any other conflict of that era. Black Seminoles weren't runaway slaves. They were free people, defending their homeland alongside Native allies. But colonization did what it always does. It divided. Through the Dawes Act and the Indian Removal Act, many native black people were forced into false categories. Colored on one hand, Indian on the other. This stripped generations of their native identity, erasing their role as original people of Turtle Island. Yet, the truth still breathes. Oral traditions, old census records, and family stories remind us that native black Americans were not outsiders. They were the builders, warriors, and keepers of this land. From the Yamasee in South Carolina, to the Washita in Louisiana, to the Black Seminoles who crossed into Mexico, their presence is undeniable. For far too long, the mainstream narrative around Black Americans has been one-dimensional. Enslaved Africans brought to the Americas. While that chapter is real and painful, it is not the full story. What's often ignored or deliberately erased is the deep, complex, and ancient history of Black people in the Americas long before 1619 and even before Columbus stumbled into the Caribbean in 1492. Across the globe, every ethnic group, from the Irish to the Chinese to the Aztecs, has a recognized origin story. People study and celebrate where they came from. But when it comes to Black Americans, the conversation too often begins and ends with slavery. That's no accident. It's a systemic form of historical erasure. But history, oral traditions, archaeology, and even admissions by modern tribal nations are proving otherwise. The term Turtle Island comes from indigenous creation stories across North America, especially from Iroquois and Algonquian-speaking peoples. But what many don't know is that some of the earliest descriptions of the inhabitants of the Americas speak of dark-skinned, woolly-haired people, people that closely resemble what we today call Black people. From Olmec stoneheads in Mexico, clearly bearing African features, to accounts by early Spanish explorers describing dark-skinned tribes in Florida and along the Mississippi River, the evidence keeps stacking. These aren't theories. They're artifacts, records, and testimonies. Ancient Black nations and tribes lived in what is now North America long before Europeans and enslaved Africans arrived. These indigenous Black Americans were here, rooted in the soil of Turtle Island, practicing their cultures, languages, and trade. Fast forward to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, when the U.S. government began issuing the Dawes Rolls. These were official lists meant to determine tribal membership in native nations, especially among the so-called 5 civilized tribes: Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Muskogee, and Seminole. Here's the catch. Many Black native people who had lived with these tribes for generations, often intermarried, shared culture, and even fought in wars together, were excluded or placed on separate freedmen rolls. The Dawes Rolls labeled them not as tribal members, but simply as freedmen, which stripped them of their rights, land claims, and full citizenship within the tribe. This government-sponsored separation rewrote identity and legally erased native Black people from the official story. It was strategic, aimed at limiting land claims and consolidating tribal power in the hands of a few, especially after the Civil War and the ending of slavery in Indian Territory. After over a century of denial, the Cherokee Nation officially recognized Black freedmen descendants as full citizens. This wasn't just a legal decision. It was a validation of generations of oral history, genealogical records, and DNA evidence proving that Black people were part of the tribe, not just as slaves, but as kin. This change didn't come easily. It followed decades of legal battles, activism, and pushback from within the tribe. But it opened the door to re-examining other tribes' roles in the enslavement of Black people, a part of history many native nations are still hesitant to confront. The uncomfortable truth is that some native tribes were complicit in chattel slavery, owning enslaved Black people, and aligning with the Confederacy during the Civil War. That's a part of the past that complicates the narrative of shared oppression, but it must be told. It doesn't erase the suffering native people endured under U.S. colonization, but it does highlight the layered, interconnected, and sometimes painful truth of how native and Black histories intersect, not always as allies, but sometimes as oppressors and the oppressed. Now, the acknowledgement by the Cherokee Nation is empowering a movement of native Black freedmen, descendants of those original Black tribal members who are reclaiming their rightful place in America's story. These individuals and families are restoring their languages, reconnecting to their cultural roots, and challenging the forced identity boxes of just African American or just freedmen. And where are all the naysayers now? The ones who said Black Americans were just descendants of slaves with no ties to the land, no roots here beyond chains and cotton fields? They're silent. Because the truth is louder than lies. The narrative is shifting. Scholars, archaeologists, and even tribal elders are revisiting what they were taught. The presence of Black people in the Americas is not a recent accident. It is an ancient, foundational truth. Black people have always been here, and now the world is being forced to remember. This is divine judgment. America is under judgment, not by man, but by God himself. The same God who judged Egypt, who judged Babylon, who judged Rome, is now weighing America in the balance and finding her wanting. America has sown destruction, and now it reaps decline. It has sown arrogance, and now it reaps humiliation. It has sown lies, and now it reaps truth. Truth that cannot be hidden anymore. America is a land built on blood, on the sweat and suffering of the people it has enslaved, displaced, and silenced. But tell that truth today, and they call it divisive. They call it unpatriotic. They want you to believe that history is just a collection of dates and figures, stripped of the brutality, the deception, the theft. They tell you the Trail of Tears was just relocation, that the Colfax Massacre, Wilmington Coup and Massacre, Rosewood Massacre, Atlanta Race Massacre, Ocoee Massacre, Tulsa Massacre, Harlem Race Massacres of 1943 and 1964 was just riots, and that Jim Crow was merely a setback. What they refuse to admit is that America was never a nation of freedom. It was a nation of conquest, built on white supremacy, and it has never stopped being one. And that is why they are so desperate to erase the past. You see, history, real history, has power. It reveals the truth of this nation, of what was done and what is still being done. They call it critical race theory today, but it's just the truth, and that's why they fight so hard to bury it. From school boards banning books, to politicians scrubbing slavery, from textbooks, to social media platforms, silencing voices that dare speak honestly about America's past. White supremacy is culturally ingrained into every aspect of white society, in the home, school, religion, and politics. But tell me, what does it say about a people who fear history? It says they know their hands are bloody, and they are terrified that their children will ask them why. Because the truth would destroy their illusion of innocence. The same way it did when the world saw Black Wall Street burn. The same way it did when Jim Crow's chains were exposed for what they were. The same way it did when the Southern strategy was revealed as a blueprint for racial control, not democracy. But America has always had a strategy. Slave patrols became the police. Redlining became modern real estate steering. The plantation became the prison. And now, they want to act like none of it happened. They want to rewrite history to keep future generations obedient, ignorant, docile. And yet, what they don't understand is that you cannot erase pain. You cannot erase memory. You cannot erase the reality of people who have suffered and endured. This nation made laws to steal land from Native people. The Homestead Act gave free land to whites while barring Black freedmen Americans from ownership. The Immigration Act of 1924 made sure America remained a white country, closing its doors to those it deemed unfit. And when we, Black freedmen Americans, dared to build wealth, dared to thrive, they sent mobs, they sent bombs, they sent laws disguised as justice to tear down Black freedmen Americans' communities. And it wasn't enough for them to unalive us. They had to erase us. They built highways through our neighborhoods, turning communities into ghettos. They passed California Proposition 14 to uphold segregation. They used COINTELPRO to assassinate Black leaders. They used the daughters of Confederates to put Confederate statues in our faces, not in 1865, but during the Civil Rights Movement, as a warning, as a message. And still, they want us to believe in their version of America? An America where slavery was a misunderstanding, where the Tuskegee experiment was a footnote, where mass incarceration is just an accident? No, sir. No, ma'am. White supremacy is in the bones of this country, in the schools, the churches, the homes, the politics. It is a disease, and they refuse to cure it. But there is something they should fear more than the truth being known. They should fear what happens when the next generation realizes they have been lied to. What happens when young people of all colors understand that history was stolen from them, that their textbooks were propaganda, that their teachers were ordered to deceive? A people who know they have been deceived do not trust, and a people who do not trust begin to question everything. That is what America fears most, not the past, but the reckoning it demands. And that reckoning is coming. No matter how many books they ban, no matter how many voices they silence, no matter how many lies they tell, truth is like a flame. It spreads, and once it touches the people, it cannot be extinguished. The question is not whether America will reckon with its past. The question is whether America will survive what it has done. Tell me what you think about this topic. Hope you find the information in this video informative. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. Thanks for watching.